On Simon Willison's excellent blog yesterday, he pointed out this tweet talking about near manic episodes triggered by watching software shift from scarce to abundant and cognitive overload from living in an inflection point. That tweet seems to be resonating with a lot of the software people at the moment. As for me, I'm feeling a very strong sense of deja vu right now. It's eerie. I felt like I've lived through this before, and maybe I can help give you some perspective. The last time things felt like this to me was 26 years ago, now-ish. I was working at my first startup, Dot-Com. That's a story for another day. We were almost a month past the Y2K changeover, which had turned out to be a non-event because a lot of people had done a lot of work to prepare for it. But that's yet another story for another day. In early January of that year, an essay entitled Bubble.com had been written by an analyst and leaked almost immediately and was doing the rounds inside the startup community. It detailed the case for why the current tech company valuations were incredibly overvalued and a correction was inevitable. Things were starting to feel tenuous, and I was getting quite worried. A couple of months later, not that I knew it yet, in March, the NASDAQ would hit its peak and then it would start falling. It would lose 3/4 of its value in the following year and a half, and it wouldn't see those highs again for 15 years. And between the warning and the crash was the big football game of 2000. I'll be referring to it as the Superb Owl to avoid copyright trolls. I couldn't even tell you who was playing, but I still remember the ads. There were so many .com commercials during that game, they had their own Wikipedia page. I remember how jarring it felt to see companies that were so overvalued and losing money like crazy spend so much money advertising. It seemed like deliberately poking the bear, or at least tempting fate. Especially since one of the ads was the E-Trade monkey dancing in a garage for 20 seconds, followed by a screen with the words, "Well, we just wasted $2 million. What are you doing with your money?" Any of this sounding familiar? The very next Superb Owl, in 2001, there was an E-Trade ad called Ghost Town, showing the same monkey riding a horse through a deserted town filled with thinly disguised logos of failed .coms, including a discarded Pets.com-like sock puppet. The juxtaposition between the reality and the marketing hype of AI feels just as discordant and uncomfortable for me as I remember from that January 2000. We know that LLMs have plateaued and that even some industry insider experts are admitting it's time to go back into a research phase, that the valuations and revenue forecasts are implausible. But despite that, a social network made exclusively for AI agents to talk to each other is going viral. I paused work on a video about that to make this one. And although as I'm writing this, I don't know exactly how many AI commercials are going to be in the game this weekend, I do already know there will be a lot more than it seems like there ought to be. Tens of billions of dollars is being spent to advertise these companies that are losing billions of dollars a year, with valuations already overinflated to the point where financial collapse seems inevitable. Just like with the .coms in 2000, this seems like a last desperate attempt by the AI companies to stave off disaster, continuing a proud tradition of soon-to-be unemployed marketing departments from FTX during the so-called crypto bull in 2022, and stretching all the way back to Atari's vain attempt to pivot from video games to home computers in 1984, right after the Christmas video game crash of 1983. It's often humorous in retrospect, but it's not fun in the moment. It was a scary feeling in January 2000, and it's a scary feeling now. But we got through that, and we can get through this, and the two situations are even more similar than you probably realize. Compounded with the tech crash after the .com bubble, there was also a big wave of offshoring of software and IT positions that also depressed the tech job market. It was a double whammy. Developer jobs were being closed because the cash paying for them was drying up, and many of the developer jobs that were still being funded were being moved overseas. It turned out, though, that for various reasons, including the then immaturity of many of the foreign firms, poor communication, and high levels of turnover amongst the big overseas providers, the code that U.S. companies were getting from offshore vendors was not up to the quality that was needed. It was bad for internet software quality in general, but it was good for developers because it forced companies to hire developers in the U.S. to clean up all the substandard code that offshoring had created. Some of us made a lot of money on some of those cleanup projects. And that is a lot like the impact that AI is having on code right now. Lots of bugs, lots of bad code, lots of security vulnerabilities are getting pushed out very fast. Absent an imminent, miraculous breakthrough in AI tech, there's going to be a ton of demand for developers to clean that code up. In many ways, AI coding agents can be thought of as just another iteration of offloading development tasks to cheaper resources of lower experience and quality. And there's another similarity. Back in the late 1990s, we didn't have Stack Overflow. We didn't have GitHub. We didn't have package managers like NPM or pip. We didn't have a huge variety of open source modules we could pull into our projects. Hell, we barely had Google. It was still smaller than Yahoo at the time. Those advances made software development go faster, and those of us who predated them had to learn how to keep up with newer developers who started off using the new tools. There was a lot of fear that the new resources would make developers so much more productive that the number of developer jobs would drop forever. In fact, the opposite occurred. Those advances meant it became economically feasible to use software to address a bunch of problems that had been out of our reach before. There's every reason to believe that large language models will have the same effect. People have been saying for years that developer jobs are going to go away, never to return. But these days, I'm putting together side projects on a regular basis with Claude Code that I never would have bothered to even attempt before because the amount of time it would have taken to do it the old way wouldn't have been worth it. There's a whole new world of projects ahead of us that would never have been possible before. Unfortunately, we can't move forward as long as we're stuck in this holding pattern. The valuations are just not sustainable, and there just isn't that much money to go around. I'll put some link to Ed Zitron's financial analysis below, as well as a link to the Bubble.com paper from 2000 and the follow-up that same author wrote last year. Those papers are also worth reading. The coming crash is scary, but the sooner it happens, the sooner we can get through all of this. And maybe, like in 2000, the big, expensive AI commercials this weekend will be the harbinger of the end of the hype. The bubble has to collapse, and the tech world has to face reality and come to their senses. Hopefully, it will happen sooner rather than later, because the more inflated it gets, the worse it's going to be when it pops. But if you're feeling unsettled, unsafe, or insecure by all this, understand it's not just you, and know that we've been here before and that we came out better and stronger on the other side. There's every reason to believe that more opportunities and more interesting projects are waiting for us once the current irrational exuberance dissipates. Hang in there. We can do this. Try and enjoy the ads. Some of them are hilarious. And thanks so much for watching. Let's be careful out there.